Ryan Divish joins the show to discuss the future of Randy Arozarena in Seattle, the build-up to Scott Servais' firing, and more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, August 30th, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So yesterday, Colby and I reacted to Ryan Divish's interview with the Marine Layer podcast, which basically went viral within the Mariners fan base for what he had to say about Randy Arozarena's future in Seattle and the possibility of the team trading one of its starting pitchers. But instead of just trying to read between the lines of what he said, I went ahead and asked Divish to come on the show so I could ask him for clarification myself on a couple of things and some other questions that I have about the front office and the build-up to Scott Servais' firing. So today, you're going to hear that conversation. But before we get into it, shout out to our title sponsor today, PrizePicks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the promo code LockedOnMLB. That's all lowercase for a first deposit match up to $100. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description. You can sign up for a free 7-day trial. All right, let's get into my conversation with Ryan Divish. Joining me now is Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times. Ryan, thanks for doing this.
Not a problem.
I've been meaning to have you back on for a while, and then, you had this interview with our friends TJ and Lyle, and it's obviously kind of blown up. So
yeah, that's interesting. I like when I was doing the interview, I was like, I don't know, I was just talking. I never thought like I said anything that controversial, and then all of a sudden, like, I got people saying I'm wrong about rumors all the time and everything else. I'm like, okay, let's go. I mean, like, I guess for me, it was more just a conversation that I might have with like Larry Stone or Adam Jude, and I mean, like, I didn't think I said anything groundbreaking, but here we are.
Mariners Twitter.
I've become familiar with it. I mean, like, honestly, I started covering baseball in 2006 and there wasn't Twitter. I think I got on, I don't know when I got on Twitter. I was still at the News Tribune. And so probably 2010 maybe. And it's how it's evolved over the years. Like, I used to really like it because I felt like it was a way to offer like a controlled glimpse of who I am. And also like, giving a level of, like camaraderie with the fan base, but now it's just gotten kind of nuts is what it's at.
Did you always get like crazy emails and voicemails, or did that start at a certain point? And then when did like that kind of carry over into Twitter, into your Twitter replies?
I got some, like, for a long time, it was Mariners Twitter was a little more civil. You'd have a few really angry fans. But I think now it's almost kind of like kitschy to be angry. It's the fire everybody. For a while it was blow it up, start over. Then it was fire everybody. Like these little things. Yeah. And now the angry Mariners fans. I'm like, I'm not saying you can't be angry. This organization has done a lot to make people angry.
Absolutely.
I feel it's misplaced when it's misplaced towards me, and I think a lot of people don't understand why I don't get angry, but it is different. The voicemails though, I haven't gotten, I think something, I don't know if I messed up my voicemails or what. I haven't gotten any this year. I've been to the office at the Seattle Times maybe once or twice in the last 5 years, like during working hours. I might go in to grab like some mail. I get some mail and stuff like that, but I rarely go in. And then, so I don't know, like, if I have a phone there anymore. Like, I think there's a phone number attached to my stories, but I don't. Yeah. I used to get some crazy. I have them all saved. There's this one guy that we talked about drinking and fornication and all this other stuff. It was one of my favorites. I may have to share those because I got probably 30 of his saved, but I haven't gotten any of those. I've gotten a lot of angry emails. Like the ones threatening me are a little weird, and the one guy kind of threatens everybody. So we actually have to submit those to our security because And there's another one. There's another guy that emails me quite often, and he also kind of emails like Mariners fan care and all this stuff, and those are pretty aggressive as well.
Yeah, I've gotten some pretty crazy DMs and whatnot. The funniest thing, though, that I've ever received was on our Patreon. This was like a couple of years ago. This guy was like, "You guys sound too similar. One of you needs to use an accent or like start using catchphrases or something like that."
Oh my God.
Like, and he said that over the course of like 3 or 4 paragraphs, by the way. That wasn't like a quick little suggestion either. Like, he had some thoughts about it.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I'll do my Julio accent, bro. I'm just trying to hit bombs, bro. Or like Felix is always to me is like, fastball pretty good, change up pretty good. I always joked about Felix. Like, you would get back and listen to your recording, you think, man, he was great, and then you realize he gave you like one usable quote. He just said everything that was kind of boring with a great deal of charisma. And I remember when I did that big story, like before his last start, kind of equating it to a Shakespeare play, and like one of my favorite stories I've ever written. I did like 3 interviews with him. I think I only had 3 quotes because, he didn't say a lot, sometimes he would, but it's crazy.
So I want to just get this out of the way. What you said about Randy Arozarena, that, the Mariners will trade him essentially if ownership doesn't give them more money. Was that statement actually based on anything you've heard, or just speculation? Because, of course, he's one of the more expensive players on the roster.
Well, it's based not on speculation, but in conversations with people in the org and outside of it. And I mean, like, if the Mariners don't get money, they're going to have some tough budgetary decisions. Like, if they're stuck at the payroll, and I don't know what the payroll is right now, I'd have to look. But like, if their payroll flattens and they tell, because it's basically a year ago, they said, oh, the payroll is going to go up, and it really didn't go up. I mean, it went up based on level of inflation, kind of player inflation. I don't think it's significantly more than next year, maybe within the $5 million margin, which for us is a lot, but for a baseball team isn't. If they have to do that again, if they can only work within a $5 million margin of where they were at this year, that's George Kirby alone, $4 million. Like, Logan got $4 million in his first year arbitration eligibility, 4.1, I believe. I mean, obviously, George is going to get that. Cal Raleigh going to be in his first year of arbitration eligibility. I mean, it's going to be $4 to 5 million. And Logan Gilbert, who's at 4, logically will double to around 8. I mean, like, it could be some wiggle room there, and they negotiate on that. So, like, right there, you're talking 3 players that had just increased your payroll by what, $10 million, $11 million. One Randy Arozarena. Now, I'm not saying like their goal is to trade him or whatever, but if they have to make hard decisions, if they have to, maybe they have to trade Randy because he's going to get more expensive. It's the whole. Do you think the Rays really wanted to trade him? I mean, they didn't want to trade him, but they have payroll issues, and that's what's concerning if you're a Mariners fan, is that this team and this organization may have to start acting like the Rays if they don't invest more dollars into it. I mean, like, think about when the Rays traded Chris Archer and they traded Blake Snell. They traded all these guys when they started to get expensive in arbitration. Are the Mariners going to have to do that? Because, like, part of the knowledge was with the Rays is they didn't think any of these guys were going to resign anyways. They didn't have the capital to resign them. I mean, I think Randy probably might have resigned for like a decent amount because I think he really liked it there. And all indications are he really misses being there. I think you could see it when you were
there. I've heard the same thing, that he's had a hard time adjusting. Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say he's miserable, but he's not the happiest dude on the planet. He just moved 3,500 miles away. Your family's still back in Tampa for the most part. All your friends, everything, your entire life is 3,500 miles away. And you're, I mean, he's probably, my guess is that he didn't even, he's probably living in the Silver Cloud because they don't, you're not going to get an apartment for 25, 30 games, you're barely here. So it's like, living in a hotel all the time isn't for everybody. I prefer it, but, but that's a hard question, isn't it? That's a logical thing. Like, if you have to make a tough decision on what you want to invest in, because that's the same thing about like me saying they might trade Logan Gilbert. Okay, you have to make a tough decision on what you want to invest your dollars in if you're not able to add dollars. And
Right.
I mean, like, that's a discussion that they like, even if you're bringing in Randy Arozarena for this season, because like your focus when you bring him in is this season. Like, they love to have the club control because they love to have that option. But like, I think they knew bringing him in that, like, hey, like, if this goes south or if they make a big shift in our budgetary things or anything like that, we'll have to trade him. He still has value. You know, he can still get something back. So yeah, they know that, you know, it's a possibility. You know, it's not like they're not going to non-tender him, you know. But what if he's, you know, I mean, again, too, like, is he, I mean, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's a really good player, but is he not the aircraft carrier? You know, is he that much? Like, because what does he make, an 8 right now? So we figure he'll make 12 next year, maybe. 8, I think he makes 8.5. So if he makes 12, which is the same as what Polanco, and that's kind of how you look at it, how they goose it. Well, they just won't pick up Polanco's option. They had that budgeted for next year. They don't pick it up. You got Randy for 12.5 next year. But that's the thing, is like, what do you value? How do you make it affordable? And like, and that's why, I mean, like, they have to have this discussion, because you can't just, I mean, you're looking in the now, but you still have to look at next year as well. What are you going to do next year, and how's it going to work? And I don't think they know exactly what. I don't think Jerry DePoto and his folks know exactly what the budget's going to be for next year. I think they're still waiting to hear, and that could change because it changed last year. They thought last year, I think from what I'd heard conservatively, they thought they were going to get more, you know, maybe add 20 some million onto their payroll, and then the Comcast Xfinity stuff comes down, the Root Sports. I'm sure UW fans hate Comcast right now too, and so then it all changed, and they said no. If you want to make moves, you got to do it within the framework of the budget, because it's only going to increase incrementally.
More from my conversation with Ryan Divish in just a moment, but first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Liquid IV. I think most of us can agree that there is nothing better than enjoying an ice cold beverage on a hot summer day at the ballpark. So when you're taking in America's pastime, don't forget to hydrate with Liquid IV's Popsicle Firecracker flavor, a surefire summer hit. Get hydrated with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, because baseball and summer go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. Tear, pour, live more. One stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use the promo code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. You talked about the relationship between Jerry and Scott becoming strained over the last few years, and that's something that I've heard about as well. And, you know, I've been thinking about this, and I think back to the last winter meetings, and Scott was, I don't know if I want to call it necessarily like a mask off moment, but he was pretty obviously frustrated with either Jerry or ownership or both, and was kind of candid about that when he said the whole you know, we're working with the cards we've been dealt thing, or whatever exactly the wording was. Am I reading too much into that, or would it be fair to say that maybe he was becoming more resentful over time, especially the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there's levels for Scott's frustration with Jerry, with the front office. He's gotten 2 contract extensions from this organization, and he was still probably in the bottom third of manager's salary, you know. And the second contract extension, I know, like, he asked for more money because DePoto got a raise, and I'd heard that DePoto just said, well, why? You got an extension. Well, he goes, you got a raise? I want a raise, you know, like, I'm helping build this on the field. And I think Scott at times got frustrated because Jerry had a habit of kind of disappearing sometimes from public, you know. And I know Jerry had some illnesses and stuff for a while there. Like, he had a nasty bout with COVID for a while that really knocked him down for almost a month. You know, he wasn't out and about. But like, I think Scott felt a lot of times like he had to sit there and answer for a lot of stuff that wasn't his decisions, like players and rosters and philosophies. I mean, like, it was like that. And, because we, as journalists, we ask this stuff, but we don't like the uncomfortable stuff or the difficult stuff or the stuff I know that he can't say with the root camera on or in the pre-game scrum. Like, you don't ask it there. Like, I've been doing this a long time. That just makes everybody look bad. It's like when DePoto had those comments to Rosenthal in The Athletic, I got asked Scott if he read them. Well, I don't do that in the pregame scrum with everybody around. No, I pull them off the side and say, hey, did you read this? This or that? What's your reaction? Because I'm not trying to embarrass the dude, and he's not under oath, but he's also more likely to give me an honest answer when it's just me and him. It's similar, like we always joke that, like, when me and Daniel Kramer or Jude talk to Cal and there's no TV cameras around, he's a little more open because, he's had to wear it a couple of times for things he said. So I think that's the frustration as well, is that, like, Scott's out there and he's having to, like, explain stuff that he doesn't necessarily love. Like, I remember I just, like, because I'd make random comments, like, during the Winker years about, like, to him offside. I was like, how can you play him out there? Your pitchers are starting to get pissed off. And he just looked at me and goes, one time he goes, do you effing think I like to play him out there? Do you think that's my choice? He's like, I don't have a DH. He goes, I have a DH that I got to have here. We're trying to do this. I don't want to play him in left field, but this is kind of how our roster is set up, and this is what they want us to do, I mean, because it's not like Jerry's telling him, here's the daily lineup, but all GMs focus on who gets to play and who doesn't. As I've said, I've used this all the time. This isn't Moneyball movie. The GM doesn't have to trade a player so the manager stops playing him. The GMs dictate the overall, like, concept of playing time, how it's going to work, whether you're going to use the platoons or not, all that stuff. They dictate that down, and the managers have to find a way to put it in action within reason. It's not like Jerry's making the lineup up, but he's the one telling him. I mean, this dates back to, I remember Don Wakamatsu said, do you think I like playing Unieski Betancourt every day and rewarding him with playing time when he doesn't do any of the work he's supposed to do and we can't get him to listen to one thing we said? He's like, well, what am I supposed to do? They told us to play him, so we have the chance to trade him. And it's like, it's the same thing. It was like, everybody knew that Jesse Winker and the roster wasn't meshing. You could see it, and then you have players start to admit it towards the end of the season. But they weren't going to say that because they knew they were going to try and move on from him in the offseason. It was like that end of season press conference where everybody's, oh, I don't know what Ryan's talking about. No, Ryan knew what he was talking about because the players I don't make it up. I mean, like, the players tell me. So, it's like, I think that's what Scott's frustration started to really gain, is like, hey, I'm the one out here having to answer for this. And this is some of the stuff that, like, I don't want to do it this way. I'd rather do it this way, but, like, it's the whole, if you're going to, the Parcells, if you're going to, cook the meal, you want to be able to shop for the groceries. Like, Scott's out there trying to make, I wouldn't say the chicken salad line, but he's out there trying to make a gourmet meal with peanut butter and jelly. And that's not how it works. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration came from, roster decisions, who's on the team, who isn't. You think Scott wanted to lose Gino Suarez? I mean, he was frustrated by Suarez a lot last year, kind of showing up, not in the best of shape and everything else. But, like, from a clubhouse standpoint and keeping everything normal, Scott wanted to bring Carlos Santana back because he felt like it was a good thing for Julio. He felt like it was important for Julio to have that voice there, but, like, he doesn't get to choose the roster. No manager gets to choose the roster or the playing philosophy. I mean, that's why we see, you don't see the strong-willed managers out there anymore, because, like, the GMs and the baseball presidents have ultimate power, and that's how it works. So I think that was a big part of the frustration.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, that makes the Dan Wilson hire all the more interesting because, I've talked to some people who've been around Dan, and it's pretty much the same report on him, no matter who you ask. Great man, players love him, but he's not a modern manager. I had someone tell me straight up, like, he can't tell you what WOBA is. And obviously, this organization is very analytically driven. So how do you see that all working out, that dynamic working out between coaching staff and front office?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think Dan is willing to learn some of the WOBA stuff because, like, that's one of the things, like, with the Mariners charting and their advanced scouting, they love WOBA, expected WOBA, stuff like that as decision making for, pinch hits or matchups or all that stuff. But I think, and one of the things that the Mariners have been good at on the pitching side is like having the right people to simplify what your advanced analytics are telling you in a way that makes it clear for what you want to do. I mean, like, you've watched the games. Have they played anything? I mean, because, like, you are who you are and you can't change your roster. Have they played differently since you watched them? I mean, every pitching matchup that they've done in terms of bullpen usage seems like typical, like kind of how they play it, I mean, they go with,
I guess they've been more aggressive on the base pass. That's about it. But also, this is a 6-game sample size, so it's really easy for us to get into hyperbole when we're talking about this because it's the only sample size we have. But there's been little things here and there that I've kind of noticed, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, and even like them, they were the first to admit, like, I think that's a big misnomer for fans. Most steals aren't called from the bench. A lot of times, like, they'll call and most players know this, but like the 2-2 or 3-2 count with one out and you're on first and take the chance to double play and you go, like those ones they kind of know, but they'll call those sometimes for maybe somebody like that isn't the fastest guy in the world. But for the most part, like all those steals the other day on Robbie Ray and the Giants were all off of their own reads because they just like, guys have going into a game, they have green, yellow, or red. You're green, you can go whenever. It's your read. Make the right decision. Like, trust those guys. So it's Rivas, Demo, Julio. Who else is fast? Like those guys, Robles, Arozarena. They all have green. They have green. For almost any situation. So they go. Like I asked Dylan Moore, he goes, no, I knew that Robbie was slow to the plate. He goes, I knew Casali doesn't have a great arm, and he's slow to second. So I was just going when I felt like I had a good jump and a good read. It wasn't called. And even
we saw occasions of this under Scott as well. Like I remember when they were playing the Rangers and they just bullied Andrew Kisner.
Yeah, because they knew he can't throw. Yeah, and so it's like they know. I mean, they do study this. I mean, like Cal went the other day, but Cal had kind of yellowish green, and he told Negron, hey, I know I can make this. I'm getting a good read. I'm going to go. And Negron said, go, like he said, okay, yeah, I got you. I'll tell you to go. So it wasn't like, these, like Dan may tell them, hey, steal more, but it wasn't like Scott was telling them to steal less. The problem is like a lot of their best base stealers weren't getting on base, the whole steal first. I mean, Dylan Moore can't steal first base when he's getting on, he can't steal second when he's only getting on base, 2 out of every 10 times. And that was an issue as well. I don't think that they were so bad offensively, and so they couldn't play kind of the aggressive style because the best base runners weren't getting on base consistently enough. So no, I don't like. Maybe they're going to be more. Maybe they give more guys the green light to go. But even like the Rivas bunt, Dan didn't call that the sack bunt. In fact, I don't think they were real pleased about sack bunting in the 5th inning of a game. Like, hey, like they don't mind the bunt for a base hit. They don't get mad at that. If you see an opening, go for it. But like, I don't think that we're going to see drastic, because Dan is old school. Doesn't mean he's going to go back to old school style. I mean, he's not going to run Logan Gilbert 125 in pitch count, or Bryce or anything like that. I think because Dan has been in this organization and a lot of what they do, he's talked about, he believes in the basic levels of what, the basic philosophies of this organization. I think really it just might be the different voice trying to get through about these principles more than anything. But even then, like I've joked, like, do you think like when Julio's up there at the plate, do you think he's worried about, if I don't control the zone on this, I'm going to be in trouble, or if I don't, no, I mean, like, the overall messaging is something that as a whole you lean into, but you really want like the guys in your development staff side to build on this. Like, hey, just value certain things. We value certain things. And I think you talk about like Scott got them to value 90 feet. You remember how bad of a base running team they were for a while? You remember Ben Gamel? And like
Yeah.
Scott just said enough. Like, we're going to be better at controlling the running game, and we're going to be better at running the bases. They got better at it. We haven't seen the thrown out at trying to advance to second for the third out after scoring a run. Like, he wanted them to understand the value of an out more. So I think Dan still believes in that too. I think like the basic principles of what they believe in are going to be relatively the same. It's how Dan enforces it or kind of stays on players about it.
My sit down with Ryan Divish continues in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Think Tyreek Hill will get more than 90.5 yards in week 1, or that Caleb Williams will throw for fewer than 236.5 yards in his debut? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, run your game. I have my own, I don't know what you want to call them, suspicions, I guess, about this. And to me, it seems pretty obvious what the answer is, but hiring Dan, making him the full-time guy, that was an ownership-driven decision, right? That wasn't a Jerry decision.
It sure smells that way. I mean,
yeah.
I guess if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, I mean, I can't think of any other reason, that it wouldn't be, because Dan doesn't necessarily fit the Jerry profile. I mean, he is. It's a catcher. He's amenable. Like, he's a good dude. Players like him. They respect him because they've known him. It's not like, I don't think they disrespected Scott, but like they just, for a lot of people thinking, oh, you're bringing in somebody new. What if they don't respect him? Well, Dan's been in the organization. They know him for the most part. So, and it's not like Dan is going to be Lou Piniella or, he's going to be this hard ass that tells them, hey, don't, we're going to all wear the same colored shoes and we're all no more earrings and all that stuff. No, he's going to still be kind of the same way that Scott was and let the players be themselves, because I think he understands that's the best. I mean, look what it's done for Victor Robles. So I mean, it does seem to me like, I haven't got a hard, fast answer on that, but I mean, like, I can't think of another reason. Like, even if it wasn't just strictly ownership, there's a lot of ownership influence, I would imagine, because that's what they do, right?
Yeah. Does that say anything to you about how ownership views Jerry? Because like my co-host and I talked about this on a show last week. Like, Jerry's kind of the perfect president of baseball ops for how ownership wants to run this organization. What is it now? 6 out of the 9 years Jerry's been here, the team has been relevant in the playoff conversation in August and September, all while operating on a budget. So like, do you think ownership actually looks at Jerry in a critical light?
Yeah, I mean, I think on certain things they're probably critical. Yeah, has he made them competitive? Yeah, I mean, obviously, and the competitive level of what they're doing and this hot start. What did they have? 35,000 at the last game on an afternoon against the Rays. I mean, like, the attendance will be up this year. They're putting out a good product, and they look sustainable. Like, the one thing that Jerry promised the ownership group when they did the step back was that it would be they would build a more sustainable model for success. But what is the measure of success for a fan versus an owner versus all of that? Like, That's the difference. What is the measure of success? So yeah, I think, because that's what and lost in the 54% thing. And when it was said, like, the concept of it is, it's like, hey, if you put out a winning team every year over 10 years, like, if you have if you put out a consistently good team over a 10-year period, you're going to have some years where you win 95 games and go really far. It was kind of the message he was trying to send. He did it poorly, but that's where the criticism of Jerry from the ownership group could probably come, is like presentation, optics, how things are handled. probably could be better. I mean, from my standpoint, it's great. He talks, he fills it up when he talks. He's very open about how he wants to do things or what he thinks or what he believes. And ultimately that matters because he still makes a lot of the decisions. So yeah, I think that's probably their bigger quibble, is more about the optics or the presentation or the narrative surrounding the team, as much as what it's doing on the field. That would be their biggest criticism, because there's a reason why he hasn't been around he doesn't have a radio show and stuff like that. It just doesn't. When he speaks publicly, there's just going to be a segment of the fan base that gets angry about it.
Do you think there's a reality where there are front office changes, but Jerry stays this winter? Maybe they bring in someone, or someone gets let go underneath Jerry.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so. I mean, to me, the only way it would change is if they lost every game on the way out and Jerry gave the double bird to the fans and said, you know what, screw you. I know more than you. I don't care. I don't think he's going to do that. I mean, he's been very cautious in what he said since the 54% thing. So no, I don't know. I mean, I guess but that's a problem. Maybe, I don't know, it's a problem, but that's the aspect of having an ownership group instead of one owner. What does Chris Larson think versus John Stanton versus the rest of the minority ownership group that has a stake and has a say in a lot of this? From what I was told is not everybody within the ownership group was on board with Scott having to be the scapegoat in all this. There are other people that, not everybody in the organization even was happy with that. So I think, maybe there is, maybe if there's enough people that says, okay, we're going to do this, we don't like this, or maybe they just have a hard meeting at the end of the year and just say, okay, no, this is not working. We want to go in a different direction. Because this is what they could say. If you're a member of the ownership group, you could say, well, look, yeah, Jerry's built the farm system up. He's been great at drafting. He's built this rotation, but we don't believe he can build a championship roster, at the big league level. We don't believe that he can develop a big league roster. And, if the large portion of the ownership group comes to that realization, then maybe they do move on. So it's hard. These guys don't do anything normal. Everybody.
They do not.
No. So so when we're having these conversations, everybody says, well, why would they trade Randy Arozarena? Why would they even think about it? Well, because that's where they're at, and that's how they operate. There's nothing normal. If you have a normal thought process about what baseball is or isn't, I don't think you should apply. It's I was telling Adam and Jude when we were talking about free agency last year, I was like, when have they ever signed anybody that we thought they were logically going to sign? Whenever we ever looked at a free agent and said, this is the best fit, this is easy to do, they should do this. And then they do the exact opposite. I mean, how many of I never, when they couldn't get Trevor Story in that year, the last thing I thought they would do is pull off a trade for Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez. That wasn't even on my radar. These guys do differently because I think they have to do differently.
Yeah, Colby and I, we love the roster building stuff, especially during the winter when we have to fill up 5 shows a week. That's all we talk about. And we, look at every single trade possibility. And we have this running joke about how they'll still find a way to find someone that we didn't talk about. And we'll talk about hundreds of guys, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not even exaggerating about that. We will literally cover pretty much everyone in the league and they'll somehow still find a way to surprise us.
Yeah. I wasn't talking about Mitch Garver because in the landscape of who Mitch Garver was and how they had fought for so many years fought against the idea of having a full-time DH. And now you're starting to see why they probably fought against it, because you have a bunch of guys that are playing in the field that are probably DHs. And so that wasn't on my radar. I mean, even if you looked at kind of his hard hit percentage or his numbers, because it was such a small sample size and the knock around him was that he couldn't stay healthy. Well, I just didn't seem to jive with what they were doing, but, and even when they traded for Polanco, I knew they liked Polanco in years past and they couldn't get him. So I kind of just figured they wouldn't go that route once they were there, but they did. I mean, like, I just never, I guess I've kind of come to the point where expecting like the typical or the logical isn't always ideal. I mean, even like the firing of Scott, well, you fire the manager, you bring in no interim manager, bring in a guy like that doesn't seem
full-time guy. Yeah.
I mean,
I know you talked about this with TJ and Lyle, like, you know, you have to feel for like Adam Gresh and Alex Mayer and Tim Hevley and those guys over there. Cause it's just, you know, again, this team, you know, whoever it is, right? Like, it just feels like, whatever decision they make, they utterly refuse to be just normal about it.
Well, yeah. And it's like, okay, you're going to fire Scott. Like, I had a pretty good idea. Like, if they were going to fire Scott, it would have came on that Thursday. I had a story pre-written. I had everything, all the numbers, like, you know, but then somebody in the org leaks it and it gets out there and Scott doesn't know. So they can't, you know, nobody within the org, Hollander, Jerry, even the PR staff can't even say, well, yeah, no, this is confirmed, because they can't, like, they don't want more people out there reporting it when Scott doesn't know. And so it's just like, it's, you know, and I like, it's just, and they're smart about, like, they're a good PR staff and they know how perception is, but like, I don't think that some of the ownership group or sometimes Jerry listens to what they have to say, because, you know, that's the problem. Like, some of those guys just think they're smarter, that they know best, when like these people that are there working with us all the time know how it looks, how it's going to be presented. I mean, like Tim Hevley's been there forever. And so he remembers me when I was just this punk kid who didn't know what the hell he was doing and made a ton of mistakes, but he knows how I'm going to write things. He knows what my reaction is going to be, and he knows how I operate. Like, he can tell those guys, this is how Divish is going to do it, you know, whether they listen or not, who knows, you know, but that's, you know, it was the same thing with the Mather firing. Like, you know, you don't think that like those guys are telling him, hey, this is bad. Meanwhile, like, from everything, like, those guys realized it was bad, but like, it didn't seem like Stanton and the ownership group thought it was that bad.
No, I remember you repeatedly asking Stanton questions in that press conference and how awkward it was.
Yeah. And I don't like to be that guy, because it's not like I'm not afraid to ask tough questions, but like sitting there pressing the same one, they're not under oath, you know. But I tell people all the time, we ask the questions, it's the answers you don't like, you know, and when we ask them or how we present it. But yeah, that's, you know, I feel bad for those guys, because like they're out there dealing with it. And like, those guys, like when the Mariners first made the postseason a couple of years ago, I was happy for those guys, you know, like, because they're there every day and they're wearing it and they get frustrated and they're right there with the players every day, you know, and they, you know, like, they just lost 4 in a row, and then they got to go ask, hey, can you go on with Softy, you know, like a player, or hey, can you go on 7-10? You know, it's like they have to deal with some crappy stuff. And so like when the Mariners won, I was super happy for them. You know, I was happy for my friends that are Mariners fans. I was happy for them because they wear it, you know, wear it every day. So it's a weird organization that way.
And you know, and I got to tell you, as someone that has to cover this team 5 days a week, you know, and we do 8 podcasts between this and our Patreon, like, it's a hell of a lot better when they win than when they lose. Like, coming up with content and all that.
I don't know how you do it. Like, that's probably why my podcast that we do has been lacking a little bit. It's been lagging. And part of it is too, is like when we first started it, Larry was still there, you know, and it's different with Larry. I mean, his kids are all grown. He had stuff. He didn't, you know, I could corner him, but like with Adam, he's got 3 kids. They're all in sports. They're all doing stuff. You know, my life is different now. My girlfriend, her 2 kids. So when I'm not working, I'm trying to sneak back to Montana to see them and spend time with them. So it's like, it's a little more difficult to fit in, you know, an hour to record the podcast. And then like people think, oh yeah, when you're done, no, you got to cut it. You got to make sure it sounds right. I mean, and Christ, like with Larry, it's like an hour to try and get his audio to work, you know? So, so like talking about this team can be kind of exhausting, or especially this last week. You know, you got me on a good day. I've had a Celsius and I'm ready to go. So.
All right. Well, I have one last question for you. It's really quick. It's kind of off topic here. Of course, the Mariners are actually still playing baseball. It doesn't really feel like it sometimes, but they're still playing baseball. They're still in the middle of a playoff race. And quite a few players have gotten waived over the last couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be more to come. So do you think the Mariners will look to add any of those guys, or do you get the feel that they're kind of content with what they have for the rest of the year?
No, I think they could add, but you have to kind of look at not what the road this year, but if they got the road next year. It's like the Rogers kid. Lefty that gets lefties out, and he can still get righties out pretty good. But he's owed $12 million next year.
Yeah.
Have they ever paid a reliever $12 million that you can remember? So yeah, I don't know that that's
not under this regime.
No. So
what did they give Nicasio? Like 6, 8?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
8. That was, and then Alex Colome, he made a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
But the last higher paid reliever that they brought in was, I think, Fernando Rodney, and that wasn't this regime. So, no, you have to be prudent. You have to look and see, and if their pitching guys see something, maybe they do it. They could add one more player on September 1st. So, the lefty reliever is what everybody says, and that should be something they look at. The rest of them, Nicky Lopez or some of those guys, that doesn't really move the needle. I haven't checked today's list, but of who's kind of out there. It's not like the Angels doing it, but we'll see. I'm sure they'll be on the lookout for the right fit, but it's got to be within kind of their budgets for this year and next year as well.
Well, Ryan, this was great. Thanks again for doing this. It really is appreciated, and the work you do is very much appreciated.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Hopefully I didn't say anything controversial. Like I said about the Logan Gilbert thing, I don't think they want to trade a pitcher.
Sure.
I just think that they might be forced to. It's
right.
not because everybody's just
on that real quick. I took it as you were saying, if they're going to get an elite hitter, that's how they're going to do it. They're not going to sign the guy, right? That's how I took what you said about the pitching.
Yeah, because they can't. I don't think there's an elite hitter out there on free agency that's willing to sign in Seattle unless you grossly overpay. And I don't know that the market features that many. Like Tony Taters, Anthony Santander. Yeah, he'd be great. Is he going to sign there? So it's like with Logan, I don't think they want to, because he embodies everything that they believe in as a pitching group. But eventually, if he's not going to sign, if you can't get him to resign or sign an extension, then that's a tough question, because you can't let him go for nothing. You can't just let him walk, and if you believe that you're able to build up pitchers and build people and continue, maybe they think Brandon Garcia is going to be ready next year. I kind of hope that they call him up for the extra man, or maybe they believe Logan Evans is a year and a half away. Maybe you have to discuss that. And the thing is people are well, why wouldn't you trade Bryce or Brian? Well, they're not expensive. That's the difference. They don't want to trade them. They don't want to make the trade, but that's where the money factor comes in. If they had the budget they wanted, they wouldn't. They was okay, we'll spend, or we'll add 2 pieces that aren't impact, or 2 pieces of sub impact, tier whatever, versus the elite guy to make it better. But I don't know that they're in a position to do that. So that's where the hard questions come in. They listened to offers on Wu and Miller. Part of the reason they didn't make those deals was because they also got set with a budget. They got told we can't spend anymore. So, you can't put a package together for a guy that costs a bunch of money if you don't, get rid of one of your better pieces that doesn't cost you anything for a piece that might help you, but costs a whole bunch. The math didn't figure out. And it sucks that that's where they're at least for the front office. It sucks that everything you do is based in this jigsaw puzzle of how do I fit this within a budget that doesn't seem to increase enough, or doesn't seem to be commensurate enough for true winning. I know there are plenty of teams that can piece it together. Look at the Royals. They don't have a huge budget, but the Royals, who knows how good they're going to be. Nobody was really expecting it this year, and they fixed their pitching because they got a pitching dude in, and they got the right guys in. So I kind of just am well, you have to discuss it. If you're not willing to discuss it, then you're not thinking forward
Sure.
enough, because this is where they're at. I mean, unless something magically changes and one of these owners either gets, a wild hair to invest more, or they win the Mega Millions and they get an extra infusion of 500 million to invest in, like, I just don't see them changing, because nothing we've seen from them says they're going to change that thinking. What reason do they have? Fans are still showing up. People are still going to games. They're still successful. I mean, maybe not making the playoffs is the push, and it's probably wrong.
But we kind of thought that last year too, right? So
and they didn't, and maybe it's like, and then like to sit there and say, well, we have this group of starting pitching. It's always going to be, they're our core. It's nice that you have the good starting pitching and it's a good core, but this dominance this year and this health and volume is so atypical for baseball season. People don't realize how special this group is and what they've done. If they continue to make every start, they're going to have the fewest starters, the most innings thrown, and it's going to be magical. But like to sit there and say they can replicate it every year is just not logical because of injuries and regression and all that other stuff. I mean, if ownership sit there and say, well, we'll always have this good pitching, that's our baseline and we can do this. No, you have to continue to improve your team with the idea that, regression can come at any point. That's what hurt this team. Julio, JP, not being who they were. These other players they brought in not being the players expected. Well, you know what? If you have more, if you have a better volume, or if you buy players, or if you bring in players that are closer to their peak time, then that's a little different. You hedge the margin for regression, or you hedge the margin for a down year for overall if you have better players that are closer to their prime and more of them.
100%. Well, thanks again, Ryan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Take it easy.
And that's going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. I've been your host, Tiding Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Tiding Gonzalez and my co-host Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Now head on over to Locked On Seahawks to get all the latest on the Hawks before the season kicks off with Corbin Smith and the gang, and tell them Ty and Colby sent you. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day and a beautiful baseball weekend, and we'll see you next time. Peace.